Oh, hi. My name is Linda Pui. You're watching the Wake Up Call. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Hello. I see you, Michelle. And if you are there in the chat, say good morning to me. I love coming to talk to you in the morning about governance. Who doesn't? Today on the episode, we're going to be talking about governance, but we're also going to be sharing podcasts. If you haven't gone to get the list in the chat here, there's a link. If you want to get that, it'll go to your email. You can follow along, or you can look at it later, or you can just listen to me because that's what we do here. That's why you're here, right? Again, my name is Lynn Dupuis. I am the host of the Wake Up Call. Good morning. The Wake Up Call is a live platform on YouTube that that talks about governance, that talks about volunteering, about nonprofit, and we get straight down to what is good governance, what is bad governance. I give you tips and tricks. We get to talk about things that we like to geek out on, and I get to share tips and tricks and tools with you on a regular basis. So if you're out there going to get that link right now, I'll wait for you. I'll wait. I'll have a drink of coffee. This morning is my Los Angeles cup. um, my kid is currently in Los Angeles right now on tour. Whatever, he does music. All right, this list of podcasts. So what I like to do is high numbers girl, Mel, Michelle. Only people with M's get to listen to this podcast. So if or this, I guess we could call this a podcast. Can we? I don't know. Anyway, maybe I'll put it on podcasts. What do you think about that? Wouldn't that be cool? Anyway, so what I like to do is take a walk and put a podcast on and listen to that while I'm walking or while I'm doing mundane tasks around the house. I'll put a podcast on. And recently, I was like, because I listen to a lot of entrepreneurship and business type podcasts regularly because I'm an entrepreneur and I have a business. I'll listen to music podcasts. I'll listen to Matt's podcast, the Cloud Machine podcast that talks about creative industries. Matt is my business partner and also my son who's on tour. Remember, keep up, people, keep up. Just kidding. So anyway, podcasts are a big thing right now. And if you're doing something, you can be listening to a podcast at the same time. And maybe that's a good avenue for this thing. Maybe I'll do that. So um I found these podcasts. I said, if I'm listening to all these other podcasts, do you think there's governance podcasts, like nonprofit governance podcasts? Who's listening to that? Me. I'm listening to it. And so a lot of people are as well. So I have listed four non-for-profit governance volunteer strategy podcasts in the document that you might have downloaded already. If you haven't, we're going to go through it anyway. I have it open here on my other device, and I'm going to go through that. So the first one that I wanted to talk to you about is Joan Gary. So I bet you, because her organization is pretty awesome. Now that I've talked about this, Joan Gary's podcast for it's called Nonprofits Are Messy. All right, that's the first one on the list. It's called Nonprofits Are Messy, and you're probably going to get ads in your social media because her organization, her business is really savvy in that way. If you start talking about her organization, you're going to get the comments, you're going to get the content. So Joan Gary talks straight up about governance. You're going to love it. It's fun. It's her first one that I'm suggesting is the seven step succession planning process for nonprofits. So we've talked about succession planning on the Wake Up Call and how important it is to have a plan to ensure that your organization is going to continue if the CEO is not there, if your board members decide to leave. Succession planning on the board in the organization is super important. I have been on the receiving end of some departures as a board member, as the president of boards, and it's not easy. She talks about what they talk about a lot of tips and tricks, and they also talk about the fact that how much time it takes. It really takes a lot of time, energy. You become the the go-to person if the CEO leaves as a president of the board, and you then have to answer to everything within the organization. It is a big job. It is a big liability if you don't have a good succession plan in place. And she talks about those 7 steps of the succession planning. So if you are on a board and you're thinking, do we even have a succession plan? Do we know what's going to happen in case the CEO wins the lottery and he's gone all of a sudden? What about our board members? Do we know how we're ensuring succession? Who's going to be the next president? Who's going to be on the board next once their mandate is over? Super important. Next episode. So that's episode 164 of Joan Gary's podcast. The next episode that I found really, really great was Secrets of a High Functioning Board of Directors. All right. So that was a great podcast that you're going to want to listen to. That's episode 152. And she goes through the secrets, and it's a lot of the things that you're going to hear on that podcast are a lot of the things we discuss on a regular basis. So it's kind of validating, first of all, for me to be sharing that information with you. And it's interesting to hear it from another perspective. So that's really great. And the other episode for Joan Gary's podcast is episode 82, Why Every Nonprofit Leader Needs a Coach. And so I found that really interesting. I'm listening to nonprofits leaders talk about why people come to them for coaches. So they interview a few coaches and they have different experiences. One of the coaches talks about the fact that he's like an experience-based coach, and he talks about his long career and how he supports action within the organization. And then the other coach that speaks on the podcast, talks about how she is a professional coach and has strategies and supports the coach. Very different opinions, very different platforms that they work off of. But the goal for both of them is to help a CEO or board chairs to achieve the results that they're trying to do, which is like what we do here at LMD Solutions, looking to help board members be the best board members that they can, and CEOs to be the best CEOs with their board that they can. So those are the Joan Gary podcasts that I suggest. The other one that I found is I501CU. I501CU is the podcast for nonprofit board members. And this is a Michael Corley. So you might have heard that name before. These are all in the States, by the way. There's I didn't find many Canadian ones, but I'm still on the search. So this podcast here is based in the States, and the episode is episode 44 and episode 39. These 2 episodes are really great. What if you okay, this sentence gave me chills when I read it, and the episode is even more important. The episode is episode 44, and it says, what if you train them and they leave? What if you don't and they stay? Isn't that like, okay, so, what if we invest all this money to train our board members and they end up leaving after a year or 2? Well, what if you don't train them and they stay, and then you have bad board members? I love that. I love that idea that if you're training your board members, it's because you want them to be good on the spot. You want them to be good with a team. You want them to be good at doing their roles and responsibilities. They will leave because technically they have mandates. Of course they're going to leave, but while they're with you, they should feel comfortable and they should feel confident that they are going to be the best board member that they can for your organization. So that's why we train board members. That's why we bring in these training sessions, and that's why we at LMD Solutions go in and work with your board. All right, the next episode from that Michael Corley podcast is episode 39, 5 actions to get the board members you want. So we talk a lot here about recruitment and retention and what works the best. This episode here was really great. You're going to want to go listen to that. It reconfirms all of the stuff that we're talking about here, and it's great to hear their perspective on that too. All right, the third podcast is the Strategic Board podcast. All right, the Strategic Board podcast is a really fun podcast by AMC Governance Solutions, and they work with organizations trying to reach their goals. I really relate to this podcast because they obviously they have the word solutions in it. My business is LMD Solutions, and they speak really frankly and a little bit like we do here. There's two of them chatting about this, and the episodes here that I have a guide to developing and monitoring of the strategic plan, right? So we talk about that here at this at LMD Solutions on the wake up call, strategies to monitoring the strategic plan. So you put in a strategic plan in place. We don't want it sitting on a shelf. We want it monitored. We want it the results to come in. We want to know that we're doing a good job so we feel satisfied and we stay engaged within the process. Because the board, when they're sitting there with their strategic plan in hand, they want to know that this is getting done. And so that podcast, episode 37 of the Strategic Board podcast, really fun, a guide to developing and monitoring the strategic plan. Really validating for what we do here. All right, the next one is episode 20 of that is how to write a fundraising proposal, okay, with Catherine Ashton. And we don't talk much about fundraising here on the wake up call, but it is an essential element, whether you're going after funding applications or whether you're doing fundraising in the community or activities within the organization. Fundraising is an element, is an essential piece to your nonprofit organization, and they will help you to survive or put projects in place or pay your staff. There's a bunch of reasons why the board is responsible and why they tackle fundraising on a regular basis. Super important. If you're on a board fundraising, you know about this. So this one here is how to write a fundraising proposal, which is interesting. Listen to that and get ideas, and it's really a fun podcast to learn about that aspect of it all, because it is something that is really important on boards. All right, last podcast is the Nonprofit Lowdown. All right, and it sounds just as intense as it is. She really takes it. Her name that does this podcast is Rhea Wong. And her description for her podcast says, I train nonprofit leaders to fundraise more money from high net worth donors. So she is no nonsense. Her podcast talks, this one here that I'm suggesting to you talks about burnout. And I talked about that in a post on social media. If you go on Facebook or Instagram, you're going to see a post that I just posted about burnout, about taking care of your volunteers, making sure that they don't overdo it. And the episode is 247. She has a lot on her podcast, and it's called The Root Causes of Burnout with Dr. Emily Bennett. And it talks about how a volunteer on a board can experience burnout and why, and how we can, as board leaders and organizational leaders, prevent that burnout. So there you go. Four podcasts with plenty of episodes. You're going to discover these podcasts, and you're going to probably go through the episodes yourself, and you're going to enjoy that conversation with the podcast hosts, because just as much as you're listening to me, they have very, very good points and very good information that I have learned over the years. And there you go. So if you do you have any questions? I see that there's some people on YouTube right now. If you do have questions and you're watching this on the rebroadcast, just leave your questions in the chat or in the comments on YouTube. Like and share this if you think this is of value to you. Being on a board can be very isolating because nobody talks about this. And I think that it is our responsibility to open up this conversation to others. And I'm always glad to chat with you if you have any questions. So uh, tomorrow we come back with Friday. We celebrate wins, but I have a lot of, I got to tell you, now that I'm doing this and now that I'm posting quite a bit about governance on social media and talking a lot more about these topics, I get a lot of people in my DMs talking to me about their challenges and their struggles. And I'm going to talk about some of those things. I'm not going to reveal any names, or I'm not going to reveal any people or organizations, but I'm going to talk to you about these challenges because they're great uh, case studies and examples of how at LMD Solutions we're like offering tips and tricks, even in the DMs, but also how we're supporting these clients in the long run. So come back for that. Tomorrow we talk about case studies and wins that we've achieved with them. So have a great day. We will see you soon. Cheers.